Hey, today I'm going to take you with me on a journey. I started writing again, and at the same time I finally felt ready to do something with my art I always wanted to do. I want to take a step back from semi-realism and line art heavy art and develop a more stylized and painterly art style. Actually, I've never had a consistent style before, and I probably won't ever settle for just one style. Just because I love to try out new things way too much. And that's what I did with my past few drawings. One example is the portrait you see me draw in the background right now. I'm going to talk about this specific character later in the video. While procrastinating from making a video about my visual disability, I started writing a short novel with a super creative working title, Harry's Journey. It's a short little fantasy adventure featuring Harry, a character I have talked about in some of my other videos before, and in the story we follow Harry on their travels through the countryside to reach the so-called great cities they have heard so much about. I am great with names for places, I know. Let's just say I like it simple. So it's a youthful fantasy story that plays in a huge world that I am consistently working on for a while now. In this world, all sorts of creatures exist, but it's not the typical high fantasy races like dwarves and elves and so on, even though some of the typical fantasy creatures exist here too. I'm not that much of an individualist. So Harry is a so-called anima, a human-like being with animalistic features like their ears and tail, but they also have some heightened senses like good hearing and so on. It depends on the race of the anima and other things that I don't want to go into right now. But in comparison to humans, anima have a closer connection to the nature and their instincts. This story takes place at a time when human and anima and also other races start to mix and live together instead of in segregation. But the story is not about the politics of this world and more character driven, so I won't go too deep into that. Anyway, it's a typical journey about friendship, and it may include a little bit of subtle system criticism. It wouldn't be a story of mine if I wouldn't include some of my own values, right? Overall, it's very lighthearted and an easy read, and maybe a little bit emotional, because that's also who I am. So every time I needed a break from writing, I started to work on drawing the main characters of the story, and these drawings happened to become style studies as well. So these were the first few times where I tried to merge all the layers together and paint on top of the line art instead of leaving it a separate layer. I also tried to give their faces a more cartoony look than my usual semi-realistic approach, which has been a personal goal of mine for a long time now, and I'm really happy that I'm starting to get into that finally. The process of creating this character you see here right now went a little bit different, and I tried to use more textured brushes for the rendering, just because I wanted to see what it would look like. This one was probably the one where I experimented around and tried new stuff with the most, and the whole process was a lot of pulling back and forth. I tried really hard to feel out the forms of the face and find the colors that looked well together and everything. Yeah, and I just had fun and went with my gut pretty much. Oh, and of course I had a reference of a head that shows the planes of the face, so that I kinda have something to check if what I'm doing is right. The initial sketch for Drew's face, this character's name is Drew, by the way. So the sketch was actually a style study inspired by Alessandro Barbucci's work, which I really adore. I ended up making my own thing out of that study and changed the looks of it to make something of my own out of it. I think it's time to talk a little bit about the character that I'm drawing here. So her name is Drew, as I already mentioned, and she is some sort of ghost or spirit that you usually only meet during the night. I don't want to talk about what she is too much, because then I would take something of the mystery of the story away. She had a past life as a human, but that was long ago, and she had to stay in her childlike body ever since. Drew has some magical powers that I won't spoil here in case you want to read the story someday. Oh, by the way, I completely forgot to say that magic exists in this world, but it's not very common and more of a legend for most humans and anima in the region, and also the time period the story plays in. So magic is very rare, and there are only a few characters who know about it yet. I also want to mention that Drew is a trans girl, just for representation purposes. Her being trans is not a part of the story. I am not trans myself, so I don't want to tell the story of something I don't have a clue what it's like about. But I really want to make sure that trans characters are absolutely a part of this world, and they exist, and they are not unseen. So during the story, Harry is going to meet Drew as well as another character called Pia. I'll add another recording of the process of Pia's portrait at the end of this video. Pia is also an animal like Harry, but her animal part is a pig. While Harry's anima part is an ermine, like you might know when you've watched some of my former videos. Drew has a very playful and cheeky personality, and she likes to scare others for fun. And that would make Pia the perfect victim pretty much. Because Pia is a very cautious character, and she has a hard time to get along with loud and very extroverted characters. But she's also very stubborn and strong and a real fighter, if you get to know her a little better. And I tell ya, you better not piss Pia off. So Drew should be really careful with who she plays her shenanigans with. Sorry, I'm getting carried away. So yeah, I'm currently writing the short story in my first language, but I'm going to translate it once I've finished editing it. All in all, it will still take a long time to finish everything off, but I hope that I can publish it this year sometime, if everything goes well. I'd really like to know if you write your own stories, and if so, what kind of stories do you write? And what's your favorite thing about writing? Personally, I cannot remember a time when I did not make up my own stories, to be honest. I didn't write them down most of the time, they just existed in my head and in my extremely vivid dreams. Seriously, my dreams are like movies sometimes. They cause me to not want to get up in the morning way too often. I don't know, I just love to create my own characters and let them do whatever they would do in a specific situation. And they often surprise me with their behavior, to be honest. Writing for me is like watching my own series with only cool characters whose intention I can always understand, even if they do something bad. In reality, I'm often like, I don't get why people do this. And I really want to understand, but you cannot look into another person's head, which is probably for the better, to be honest. However, when my own characters do something that I personally would consider as wrong, I can still love them, because I know why they are acting like that. And that's what I love about writing and storytelling in general. I like stories where the villains are not just bad because the story needs an antagonist. No, I prefer villains who act the way they do for a reason, and I want to learn about that reason while consuming the story in whatever kind of media. How about you? What do you like the most about stories? I could talk about this topic forever probably, but it's time to come to an end. Thanks for staying here if you made it this far into the video. I am really happy with how the character portraits turned out and the new style I'm working on. And I'm also really looking forward to share more about my story with you in the future. Okay, don't forget to be kind to yourself and others. See ya!